Insight and awareness, spiritual explorer. Soul intuitive, emotional and spiritual mentor and award-winning author, Lorraine Nylon.
I want to put the narcissistic term aside
Mm-hmm.
because I'm gonna blow your mind here for a moment. Can I?
I'm ready, Kevin.
All right, so here we go. Here we go. I'm not really gonna blow your mind. I really think that deep down you're gonna say, yeah, I get this. But listen, I don't even believe in narcissists and this and that. And I use it, and I'll tell you why. And it helped me as well because the terminology, what it did was help me to understand there's a difference between me and them. It popularized a word that made this different. But as I've healed and as I've moved on, what I've realized is that these diagnoses, narcissism, psychopath, sociopath, whatever path, histriopath, I don't know, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't know them all. But what I believe it is the medical industry and the scientific way of trying to sort out the difference between Cain and Abel, period, end. In the ancient world, they didn't have a bunch of diagnoses. You won't hear the word narcissist, psychopath, they just understood things as a spectrum, all right? But one of the things that the ancient world did do a lot, and Jesus did this too, is he compared people to animals.
Okay.
Do not throw your pearls before the swine.
Yeah.
What's the implication there? The implication is that these people are so different from you. It's like you're one type of an animal, they're a different type of animal. They're not going to understand you. What I try to help people understand is that one of the biggest lies I believe humanity has ever adopted is that we are all the same because we're human beings. It's like saying all animals are the same because they are the animal species, when in fact there are lions, wolves, deers, bears, rats, snakes. And the ecosystem works because they all have their function and they're all important, but they're only intimate with their own kind. So what I think was robbed from humanity is to understand ourselves and then be able to find our own kind in this life. And that's where our intimacy belongs.
Yeah.
And I'll prove this to you. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'll prove it to you. We can sit here and talk all day long about violent, hostile, aggressive, narcissistic bullies and how they rage and how they're mean and how they can want to be fearless and punch and all this stuff, right? And they're violent. They're horrible. I hate them. Okay, but watch this. Because of this world we live in, which is not good, if war breaks out in your neighborhood, right? Who would you rather have standing in your doorway? Somebody who is okay with violence and ready to take it on and face it, or somebody who wants to talk about feelings? Okay? So when you start to look at the world this way, you'll start to be able to say, okay, there's a place for things. That's fine. But when it comes to your intimacy, you have the burden of identifying your own kind. You do not have to be intimately involved. Just like a deer will not be intimately involved with a bear. It just won't happen. So we have to kind of undo what I believe are the lies, wherever they came from, at whatever part, that started to enmesh humanity. And we're from all different walks of life, and we're all enmeshed, and we're all getting together. And I really feel like that's what people are facing in these relationships, is a failure up front to recognize the voice of their own kind. So they're like, ooh, you look different, and it's a dang wolf. And they're following along the wolf to the wolf's den and then realizing, what am I doing here? I don't belong here because it's not your kind. And this is what is happening in relationships, I believe, in marriages. You're married to somebody who's not your own kind, and you're indifferent. You have nothing in common. Your affection is not the same. The way you communicate is not the same. Nothing is the same. And so a woman, for example, married to a husband who doesn't do a lot of affection or looks at sex in a weird way. And it's hard because listening to that woman, I'm like, there's a bunch of men out there that would love that, right? You're out of place. You're with the wrong kind.
I get what you're saying, but there is also a difference, just for our listeners. There's a very big difference to someone who may not be interested in sex to someone that's narcissistic and is using that as a weapon.
True.
To make you feel like you're worthless. And when I get what you're saying about the like the diagnosis of narcissism. When I first started writing, which was 30 years ago, hard to believe I can say that now. Time goes quick, people. I looked at things in separation. So, like, I looked at slyness, I looked at judgment, I looked at manipulation, I looked at different ways that, spite and resentment and how that
Right.
impacts people. And for me, when you're looking at, narcissism, narcissistic personalities, is that they are a combination of whatever one of those versions works for them. They can use judgment as a weapon, they can use manipulation as a weapon, but they are indifferent to the person that they are looking at. And that's the difference. So
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So I see what you're saying is that when we're with someone that we're not indifferent, right? We're not willing to use judgment as a weapon, and we're not willing to use our sexuality as a tool to belittle another person, then we are in the wolf's den, and we should be looking for someone that respects all that and
Sure.
is of all that. So I get what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. And I think the key part to what you've said today is really that remember that the person that is loving is who they are, and you're lucky or fortunate to be in the presence of that, and they're willing to share that with you instead of thinking that your love can convert someone to be loving.
Yeah. Well, I think that on just exploring this topic of sexuality, because I get what you're saying as well, and you're absolutely right. Weaponizing sexuality, right, in a way.
Yeah.
And there is
neglect is a type of weapon.
Neglect is also a type of weapon. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. One of my suggestions, though, is as opposed to looking at it as a weapon, I would look at it as the hiding of it, as the trick, as opposed to it being the weapon. In other words, the not wanting sex is really who they are, for example, or neglect is really who they are by their nature, but it's the forcefulness in the act in the beginning, which I put out a video that talked about why narcissistically abusive people operate so fast. The love bombing phase is so fast. And this, my challenge to my clients is anytime you're coming across somebody, be prepared. In all relationships, make it a slow dance. I mean, you set the pace, not them. Because what these aggressive personalities will do is they'll throw all this love bombing because they foresee a small window of opportunity to get what they want from you, whatever that supply is.
Yeah.
Right? And they operate within this window of opportunity, and they're looking at you. They're looking at the twinkle in your eye or whatever to see if they're getting there, right? It's almost as if you would imagine like see that thing?
Yeah, I did.
Doggone it.
It's
springtime here. It's springtime here, so there's all kinds of weird things flying around in the Midwest. So I hope your listeners got a good whatever the heck that thing was. I have no idea.
Something just flew at him.
Yeah. Landed on me. At any rate, they have a very small window of opportunity to get what they want. And so they're like a predator hunts its prey. And it's just observing. And the one that's the slowest, and I'm not calling anybody slow here, but you know what I mean. You get the point. The one that's caught off guard, the one that's drinking water more slowly than the other ones, that's the one that's going to be targeted on. And so these aggressive personalities will do that. They will,
because they've got a small window that they can uphold the illusion, the image that they're projecting. And their fear is you're going to work it out before they've got their hooks in.
Bingo. So it's not necessarily that they weaponize the neglect down the road. It's not necessarily that they weaponize not having sex down the road. That's who they really are, perhaps. They're not that sexual. They're not affectionate. They're not the intimate person that you thought they were. But through their small window of opportunity, they force that part on you so that they could come in
Yeah.
on you and get
'Cause
what they wanted.
most of them fear intimacy.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
because you might see through them, but they can't go to that place, and they know there's generally, I'm talking generally here, is that they know there's something missing within them. They often talk about there's a dark spot in me. There's I don't know, there's something wrong with me.
That's right.
When they get really honest. So they're trying to avoid feeling that part of themselves. So they can't meet you in real intimacy. So if it's not a competition, they can't turn up. And I've had lots of women that have spoke about, once they've had the kids, that was the end of the sex life, because they wanted children, they've got children, and one particular person was saying that she'd be laying in bed and she'd be listening to him masturbate while in the ensuite, and then walk out smiling at her. And so she said the message was, I'm still interested in sexual acts, just not with you.
Yeah.
And I went, maybe he was just too far in love with himself that no one else was, he wasn't interested in anyone else bar himself.
Yeah. Right. And that's disgusting. And I hear stories like that too. I wonder if we've had some of the same clients.
Well, I think what's really sad is this is more common. I mean, it's not common,
Yes.
but it's more.
Sure.
It happens more than we realize. And as a female, I've been conditioned to believe that no man's really going to knock me back. You know what I mean? If I say yes, they're going to go for it, because that's what I've been conditioned to believe. So then when you're experiencing rejection, and most females would, have that belief, when you're experiencing rejection, it cuts deep. Now for men, the couple of men, I haven't had many men clients that have talked about this subject, I must admit, but the two that I can think of, they said that they were conditioned to believe, women don't really want it after a while. So he said they took it as, well, it wasn't really a reflection of me, it's just what women do. And I was like, where did all this conditioning come from?
Right.
Yeah. So all these false beliefs and misconceptions, which means we're not looking at people as individuals, back to what you were saying before. If you've got to look at you've got to strip away those beliefs and look at the individual, and how are they treating you? How do they make you feel? And how do you feel about yourself when you're with them? Yeah.
Bingo. How do you, and the challenge then becomes, for all of your listeners out there, the challenge becomes, first and foremost, let's say you're starting over, okay? And by the way, my personal belief is that 40s, 50s, 60s, for anybody who's starting over, you're in your prime. All right. I've said this before. There's a misconception out there that your prime is in your 20s, and let's be honest, people don't know anything in their 20s, right? Your 20s and 30s, just because you can go have a night of drinking and bounce up the next day, that does not mean you're in your prime, right? That just means you're whatever. So
your liver's healthy.
Yeah, so that's all that means. But you are nowhere near your prime. But in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, you know more about yourself than ever before. You now know more about the world and humanity and people and men and women. You are in a much better place to set yourself to possibly live the best life and enjoy everything. And so the first thing, again, is to know yourself, because you have to be able to be honest. If you're an affectionate person, you need to accept that about yourself, and you can't settle for less. And you can't lie to people, right? And anymore, you can't. You need to find somebody who is going to meet you in that place, right? If you are somebody who, let's just say, you don't like to cuss, you don't like to call people names, great. Now you know that. You have got to know that now how to find that in other people. So this is the next burden that you have. First is accepting yourself. If you're an affectionate person, great, accept it. And by the way, if you're not an affectionate person, maybe you're somebody who's like, I've been married twice, I hate men. Fair enough, fine. Then don't be the one to lie and lead other people on. That's not good either. Or maybe you're not asexual. Maybe you want partnership or a friendship with a man, as a woman, but you don't want sex. It kind of, now you finally realize after all these years, it's kind of gross. Fair enough. You're owning up to who you are. And again, we're all different. But where we've got to become better as people is honest. You have to, again, deer recognize the voice of the deer. There's other people who don't really care for affection either. Find those people, and you can go and travel and do all the things you want to do, and you don't have to worry about being affectionate. If you are affectionate, the next burden you have is being able to identify it in other people, but without giving too much away. So this is where the dating process and having friends, it becomes super important that you learn the art of being able to observe and watch and listen and flirt.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to judge. We have to be judges. We are all individual judges. And people out there have heard, oh, I can't judge people. Yes, you can. You have to.
Yes.
Because nobody's looking out for you better than you are. You've got to judge each and every person in your life, which means you have to watch them. You have to observe them. And you can't tell them everything about you. You can't go out there and say, oh, I'm a very affectionate sexual person. How about you? It's like, I mean, you might as well be giving strangers the pass key lock to your front door of your house. So you have to learn the art of doing enough that implies certain things, but you have to do an awful lot of sitting back and observing. You have to watch the nature of another person. And this is what I tell people. Whoever you decide to eventually invite into your life intimately, you better make sure you like everything about them. You have to say yes to everything. There's no room for, well, I hope that changes. I hope that changes. Well, that's okay. I guess no. It's, you have to be with somebody and say, if that never changes, the worst thing about them, or even the least worst thing, if that never changes, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
And this is how we get closer to our own kind. This is a deer finding a buck.
Yeah.
This is a bear finding a bear. I resonate with everything. Your body language, the way you talk, the way you touch my hand, the way you are affectionately touching, the way it's not too, you know what I mean? I get it. It feels right. It's not too forceful. It's not too aggressive. And I because I know this now, everybody who's been married to a narcissist, they will always say it was aggressive in the beginning and I fell for it. It was love bombing. It swept me off my feet and I fell for it. You don't go for being swept off your feet. That's not what you're looking for. You're not looking to be swept away. You're not looking for someone to care. All this nonsense, all this mystical nonsense. No, it's who do I get and who gets me?
That's a good way of looking at it. And I'm just going to jump back on your judgment call, is when you're actually acknowledging reality, it's not judgment. Like judgment normally implies that you're putting someone down. You know what I mean? I'm judging them. But when you're actually observing, objectively observing, and then acknowledging reality, you don't have to think that you're judging someone. You're acknowledging reality. And that's what you need to do, because you're going to be living with the reality of that person. So,
yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, we don't want people out there shaking their fingers in other people's faces saying you. No, that's not the type of judgment. That's not the type of judgment.
And we've kind of walked into that a little bit, because now when people don't do what we expect, they go, oh, they're narcissistic, because they're not, it's, oh, geez, understand it better than that.
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. That's why I steer clear of these diagnoses, narcissist, you're a psychopath, because these things in and of themselves become hurtful. If I can challenge people in this way, like I shared with you, first know who you are. Look at it like we're all animals. Each one has its own function. If you think about it, deer, wolves, bears, rats, snakes, it doesn't matter what you think of them all. They have a function.
True.
God designed them that way.
Yeah.
Right? This is the area where we don't like, because a lot of people out there are going to say, God designed somebody violent. Yes, God did. And that's not for you. I mean, sure, you can question God all you want, but it's not for you to get angry and put your finger in the face or whatever. It's for you to say, I finally get it. It is what it is. Okay, you're over there.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not me. And this is where we find ourselves. And so we find ourselves back on this path of knowing ourselves, where we belong, our purpose, our life, who's running this race with us, who's next to us, who are our friends, right?
Yeah.
This is what equally yoked means, by the way. A partnership, a friendship that's equally yoked. It's two oxen. And again, the biblical reference, it uses animals again, two oxen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's become evident to me that part of the message of the gospel is that you have to know your kind because God has crafted you in a certain way. You have to accept it. Don't be jealous of what you're not. Don't be jealous of bullies and mean people and what they get. Don't worry about that. You come to terms with who you are, your gifting, your calling, and then you find the people who are on your path. And
Find your
this
tribe.
becomes your friend.
Yeah.
These become your partners. This becomes your marriage partner.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One of the questions I ask everyone on the podcast is, what do you think humanity needs to acknowledge and understand for us to evolve? Which I think, you have actually touched on it. Some fairly good answers already to this question. What
Yeah,
would be, yeah, you go.
that's an excellent question. Um, for me, there is no such thing as unification
Mm-hmm.
of humanity. It's a big deal right now. You have a bunch of people, you got presidents and world leaders saying unify, unify. It works to an extent, and you can unify to an extent, but you can only unify as much as the the, the ecosystem unifies. Again, you go to the forest, you have bears, deers, lions, on and on and on. They function, they each perform a function. Some clean up the swamps, some clean up the wild, right? As human beings, if we understand this, if we understand there's a place for everything, again, I'm going to challenge people. Let's put aside for a moment narcissists. Let's put aside psychopaths, sociopaths. Let's come to this place where we realize, okay, perhaps there's a place. It's not my place ultimately, and judge like a god. Not that type of judge, but there's a place for all of it. Who am I? What's my purpose in this life? What's my path? How do I protect myself? Because there are all the other things out there.
True.
And how do I align myself with those who are my kind? So again, for me, the evolution of humanity looks like us knowing ourselves and knowing our kind, and
Beautiful. And I've wrote a lot
accepting
about,
that there's other people out there.
yeah, I've wrote a lot about valuing the uniqueness of who each of us are.
Bingo.
Instead, yeah. So you're an individual within a collective.
Yes. And understand the difference between valuing another individual and their difference and becoming intimate with them. A lot of people, this gets into the territory of opposites attract. There's something very appealing and seductive almost and alluring of somebody who is wilder. And this typically draws people. Oh, that's different. That's, I hear from both men and women, and so the key is to not be lured. If you look at animals, I mean, animals have it down like they're good. Like I'm here in the Midwest, and there's all kinds of animals, deers and bunnies and squirrels, and they're all over our yard. And they've learned what other types of critters they could be comfortable. The birds and the squirrels, they're okay. They're different. They're not intimate, obviously, but the squirrels are here and the birds are here, and they're okay being somewhat close to each other. A
Mm-hmm.
deer, same thing, will wander back. And some rabbits, I've seen deer and some rabbits kind of they're distant, but they recognize each other. They do their own thing. But the moment a human steps out, deer sees the human, checks it out, says, "Whoa, whoa." That's
There's a
not like, okay, I'm not feeling this. I'm gone, right?
yeah.
Same thing with a rabbit will let you get so close, and then it's like, no, dude, I'm out, right? So we need to have this understanding that even though things may look furry and cute, even though a wolf or a bear might look, wow, I wanna pet it. No, no, no. You have to learn that it's okay. You can acknowledge it from a distance. So let me get back to the topic of narcissism, because people are like, who's this guy talking about animals? The reality is you can admire maybe even the strength or the robustness or the boldness or whatever of some overt narcissistic types. A lot of people will say, like, for example, President Trump, very overt in his and narcissistic, right? Because he says what he means, and you can, hey, that's fine. It's somewhat divisive, but it's bold. I'll appreciate that, but I'm going to stay over here, right? You learn that it's just, you let them have their place, and you just protect yourself, protect your mental, emotional well-being. You don't intimately get involved.
Yeah, I like that. Stay away from them.
Yeah, don't be seduced. Don't be
Yeah.
seduced by what's different. You can be curious about it with people, but don't be seduced into it. Don't become intimate, because once you do, you're a deer and you follow a wolf, you're going to get a wolf. And before too long, you're going to realize I've been a deer this whole time, and they're gnawing your legs off. They're eating you.
Yeah. Well, that's true. They are eating you. And anyone that has experienced these relationships full of neglect, it is never because of who you are. And that needs to be your starting foundation. This is not because of who you are. And then that will give you an access point to start looking at yourself.
You're in the wrong place. It's not who you are. It's you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Because there is your kind out there who is waiting, who would be honored to have your love.
Yeah.
Your affection.
Yes,
I have to tell a lot of the clients that I deal with, not trying to, and don't take this the wrong way, but I have to be able to tell them just so that they have an understanding. I'm jealous. I say that, as I listen to the stories of the things that you've done, the things that the way in which you've tried to love, and I'm like, I'm jealous. And and I challenge you to understand that there's a world of men out there who would be jealous and who are ready to receive what you have, right? So, who would love to receive what you have.
Yeah.
I don't know how we are on time, but there's another avenue too.
Go on, we'll go.
I feel like we just started another conversation here.
Yeah, go on.
May I?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so
honestly, go on.
This goes into the personal work side. So, personally speaking, there may in fact be a fear in you of what it might look like for somebody to really receive your love.
I think,
in other words, you might even be comfortable in the reality of having to chase and pine after somebody and actually being neglected, as opposed to having somebody open up and embrace everything that you are. It might lead you to be like, oh, no, this is smothering. I'm not sure. I really, you know what I mean? So
for sure.
There's something to that too.
Oh, absolutely. I actually think there's a lot to that, to be honest with you, because the majority of the clients that I've had that have been in narcissistic relationships, right? And even if it's not intimate ones like friendships and all the rest of it, if you track back that desire to people please, that sense of unworthiness, or that the arrogance of, okay, I can see your faults, but I can align with them. I can, be more patient. I can be more whatever you need, which is just a type of people pleasing, stems off them feeling unworthy and unlovable. So if you don't have that basis, you would see a narcissist coming and go, bugger that, I'm out of here, right? Whether it's a friendship, whatever. Parenting, siblings, that's different because you're born into it. But that sense of unworthiness is why. So it might not be that you have a problem with being intimate, but you're frightened that the other person is going to see that you're unworthy, or that lack of self-love makes it harder for you to express what you want to feel. Mm-hmm. And if you put that with someone that's willing to use intimacy, affection as a weapon, that it becomes, because a lot of women have talked about, well, it sounds really funny because you hear a lot of men talk about this, but I have heard women talk about it too. Is that it becomes a reward or punishment type of situation? Like, so you feel like if you're having sex, you're being rewarded. Like, a lot of men talk about this, and if you're withdrawing from it, you're being punished. So we create this intimacy as an arena to act out what's unresolved within ourselves. So, so it becomes very complex when you pull it apart, because it depends on how both people turned up into that relationship. And that's why a lot of people, male and female, and regardless of the sex thing, they worry about their next relationship. I had a client the other day and absolutely petrified that she was going to fall into the same trap, because she didn't realize, I think she said she sort of invested 4 years and moved in together and all the rest of it. And then she woke up and went, holy dooly, this guy, I don't want this guy to be the father of my children. And she bailed because she was frightened of what kind of father he would be. So good on her. She couldn't do it for herself, but she was willing to do it for what was potentially going to be her children. And then she's petrified that she can't tell, because she feels like her ability to observe and her discernment of what is broken. Yeah.
Fair enough. She should be. That's a great spot to be in.
Yeah.
It's a great spot to be in. It means you're learning. You're trying to say, okay, there's pieces missing there, and you keep working on yourself. It means that you're either not still quite sure of what it is you're looking for and what you need, or they're really bad for you. Either way, you've dodged a bullet. You're good.
Well, and like I explained to her, the last time you walked in naive, this time you've got this wealth of information and wisdom because you've already lived it. So those red flags that you ignored the first round, you won't ignore the second round.
Yeah. I put out a video once on YouTube. It was a short, I believe, and it's if you're dating, if you're looking for a partnership, again, the image is to be equally yoked. You want a partner. I think that I'd like to throw this out there too. I'm giving you a lot of multiple videos into one thing here. So I've replaced love with something called synergy. And for those of you who don't know what synergy is, the concept is 1 + 1 = 3, right? It's two independent things coming together for a greater output. So this is the image of being equally yoked, and this works in either friendships or in dating or in marriage. You want a relationship where you plus the other person equals a greater output, meaning you have goals, you have things you're reaching for, you have things you're accomplishing together. And this becomes probably the most important thing to consider with your relationships. If you can't see this person in your life that you're dating or you're friends with, if you can't see the positive output, if you can't see that you have this in common, then you have to ask yourself, what are you doing? Are you wasting your time? Are you, and this might get into, there's fears, there's whatever. And it's interesting when people go against those fears. I had a client once who was a female. And I'll share the story with you. And this is where I got the synergy part from, because this woman I talked to is amazing. She's fantastic. She's entrepreneurial. She owns multiple hair cutting facilities, whatever, spas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's an entrepreneur and she's got multiple locations, very successful. Yet she chose this guy who's none of those things at all, but he's cute, whatever that means, right?
Mm.
They got married, and she's at this place where she's really struggling because the inevitable happens. There's no synergy. He offers nothing to provide that support to keep going forward. He's nothing but a cute person there with no help. And so she's realizing the issue. And it's a terrible divorce that they're going through. And I challenged her on this. I said, you being a successful entrepreneur, you're right here. You're this type of a person. You're this type of an animal. You've got to figure out why your attraction is not for an equal. Perhaps you're scared. Perhaps you're afraid that somebody who is of equal with you in a partnership, somebody who has the same amount of drive, perhaps you're scared of that.
Mm.
And so you're going to what I call you're dating down. You're going down to the bottom of the barrel in hopes that this person may never leave me or this person never may cause problems, but you're automatically setting yourself up for problems because they don't think like you. They're not your type of person. So I tell people all the time, you don't want to scrape the bottom of the barrel. You don't want to go for something who's not where you are because you think they're not going to go anywhere because you're going
Yeah.
to run into issues. Likewise, you don't want to go too high because when you date or you try to be friends with people who are way higher than you, you're going to feel less than. You're going to feel neglected. You're going to do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can follow you.
So
Yeah.
the goal is to figure out what's your fear in finding somebody just like you. Maybe the fear is that you're afraid of owning up to who you are, first of all, and everything about you. And when you work that out, take time to be alone, which is what a lot of people don't do. Spend time alone, fall in love with yourself.
Mm.
Learn to love and entertain yourself. Whatever it looks like, we're all adults. I don't have to be crude here. If you want to masturbate, masturbate. You want to experience yourself, fall in love with yourself, your faith, everything. Learn yourself, and then accept yourself, and then try to accept what you resonate with. Accept that. Don't scrape the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah.
and don't reach too high.
Yeah.
You're going to be let down. But don't be afraid. If you're afraid of somebody equal as you, it means you're still kind of afraid of yourself in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I love the look for what you resonate with. That's
yes.
right in my alley there. So I think it's time to do flip the book. So I'm looking forward to this, Kevin. So you've got 3 books to pick from. Would you like book 1, 2, or 3?
I'm going to pick door number 2.
Door number 2. And that is what I refer to as the big book. It's your insight and awareness book. And you can pick between 1 and 430 pages.
Wow.
Yes. Yes, there's a big difference in the sizes of the books.
I'm going to do all right. I'm going to do 333.
3. Oh, actually, it's a picture. So I'm going to hold this up. Can you see that?
Oh, wow.
So what this image is a lady falling from grace into her unconsciousness. So that's all the storehouse of her emotional baggage, her negative self-beliefs, her fears, and she's falling. And the next picture is, which I think is what happens when we go into narcissistic relationships. And then the next picture is a splat where she's, just laying on top of all her unresolved emotions. And I'll just show you the next one. And the next picture is to grab grace for yourself and come out of it.
Wow.
So, do you think
Wow.
that's what
Beautiful
you're doing?
imagery. Can we
Yeah,
go
it's
back
gorgeous.
to 333 real quick?
Yeah.
The fall
The
part.
fall. Yeah.
So I know that is this where we talk about that, because I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about that image.
Righto.
My understanding of that image, right, would be
Yeah.
this is the fall from grace. And so from my perspective, when you showed me that page, I see a woman just falling and screaming. And so based on everything we've talked about, I think it's so fitting. And I'm glad I found that I picked that page number. I'm glad you made that page number. So falling from everything that you thought was true. You have to fall from realizing you've been conditioned in a lot of ways, everything that you believe, even a lot of stuff you've heard in church, even a lot of stuff you heard from parents and teachers. A lot of it's conditioning and none of it is really you. And as you let go of toxic relationships, a bad marriage, it's not you being mean to another person. It's you letting go of what you thought was always true. And it's very
Yes.
scary and it's terrifying. This is what it looks like when you lose everything and you you hit rock bottom.
Mm.
And you have, but the good news in this is you're at a clean slate. Once you allow yourself to scream and shout and cry and you break and all the rubble of your life falls, you start to realize that you can construct and reconstruct your life based on who you are. So don't be afraid of that fall. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid of letting go, because if it hurts to let go, you have to understand that all you're holding on to is what your parents told you, or what church told you, or what your school has told you, or what the government has told you. And you're worth more than that. You have to, this comes back to this understanding that we answer to and we are created by a entity that is beyond this reality. And so, yes, it hurts to let go of this reality, but I challenge you to experience that pain.
Yeah.
Let it be ripped from you. And it's going to hurt, and you're going to feel empty, and you're going to feel alone. And my all I can leave you with is it is the best place you can be, because it's the only place that you can actually build something yourself. You've never built anything yourself until you've dropped everything from everybody else.
Yeah. I wrote this over 20 years ago. And the fall from grace, we do it in different, we're constantly doing it where we have a belief system, and then we crack it and we fall, and then we work out the reality of it, and then we rebuild ourselves up. But when you're coming into those big ones, I called it the cracking for myself, where it just, the storehouse of the unresolved emotions that I had, the false beliefs, misconceptions, the fears, they just cracked open to the point that I couldn't ignore any of them. And I've had to go through a process, which is the rise from grace, or the rise with grace, I should say, where you start really processing the reality of what is not of you, but is stored within your system. Yeah. And that's the rise and fall from grace. So, yeah, we're on the same page. I love it. Thank you, Kevin. I've enjoyed our conversation.
I have too. It's been an honor. I'm glad we finally met. I'm
Yeah.
glad that the algorithm keepers
Yes,
have
let
allowed us
know.
to come together.
Cross paths.
Yeah.